Good morning, Rick. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Keith. How about yourself?
I'm doing well, man. It's so great to see you. I'm glad you're feeling better.
Thank you, Keith.
So
Thank
that's
you.
really, really good, man. So I thought we'd get right to it, man.
Great.
We're at a challenging time, but throughout human history, I don't know if there's any time that you couldn't say that, right? So, I mean, life is full of challenges. So along the way, somebody's able to say we're living in a really challenging time right now, and we certainly are. But with that comes a ton of openings. And what I've learned over my practice period, the last 7 years, has been something about, life and my choices and my commitment to how I want to live. And so that informs what today's podcast is about. And it is, for me, to be peaceful, joyful, and happy. You don't have to change your life. You just need to change how you live your life. And so I thought we'd start there. Should I kick it off?
Yeah, I was just going to ask you how you pull that off. If I came to you and I said, I want to be more peaceful, happy, calm, inner directed, sit me down and tell me what the rules are.
Well, the rules I would start with is that life is going to show up, how it's going to show up. And you have very little of any, if any, control over that. So with that being said, where can you exercise the little bit of control we have as human beings? And it's on the internal, your inner self. And so I would ask you to consider focusing on a practice that quiets down the voice in the head, the narratives that never stop, that never quiet down. Focus there. And if you can observe that voice, in the very beginning, it's going to be quiet. It's going to be very difficult to silence it. But if you can just observe it and let whatever it says just kind of pass through you, then I think that you will have some leverage, or you'll be at the beginning with that awareness on cultivating that inner peace in which we're talking about, so that you don't need life to be a certain way for you to be, peaceful, joyful, and happy. And so what does that look like? Well, that looks like, and for me, what it looked like a few years ago was when I was, going through a relationship transition, and the business was affected. Those things were out of my control. But what I had control over was to dedicate myself to a practice that helped me cultivate inner peace. Mm-hmm. So it's amazing that, there was still some uncertainty about whether or not I'd be able to pay the lease at the little studio, whether I'd be able to pay, my mortgage, or if I would have enough money, without going through my savings. I didn't know any of that. Like that was reality. But I was peaceful during that period, more peaceful during that period than when I was making a lot of money for me. And I had the house on the golf course and the luxury car. I was more peaceful then when it looked like I was experiencing financial security. So I didn't need life to show up a certain way, to be, as I mentioned, peaceful, joyful, and happy. And that's true today with what's going with the pandemic, and we're seeing the healthcare services being exhausted again, and we are going through some changes in which we may have to go back to some measures that were taken last year to kind of keep everybody safe and protected. So as we go through those changes, there are a lot of people that are resisting it, that are really, not only wanting, but in some ways demanding that life returns back to normal. And you can demand and you can want that all you want, but life is going to show up the way life chooses to show up. Mm-hmm. So for me, I have really embraced, beyond accepted, I've gone beyond that. I've embraced what the reality is today. And that reality is this is how life is showing up. And I'm going to make a conscious choice to change how I live with this new reality.
Yeah, I think that's it's an amazing set piece. I hope the folks who are listening took some notes on that, because there's a lot there, Keith. I think your practice shows up in a lot of ways. It shows up, first of all, in how you relate to other people. I think when we're sort of in that mode of wanting life to be different, we're agitated, we're frenetic, we tend to flail around a lot, we tend to abuse people unintentionally often because things aren't going the way we want them to. But I think when you make that transition as you have, yeah, it isn't so difficult to be kind. It isn't so difficult to be compassionate. It isn't so difficult to be tolerant of others and yourself. And the first thing that goes is judgment. That's a very hard thing to get rid of because we're all steeped in it. It's part of the human chip that we have in our heads or our hearts about judging others, because I guess there's an evolutionary reason for it. It protects us in some ways if we're able to judge what's negative and avoid it. But usually we don't use it for that. We use it for making ourselves superior and protecting our egos from what we perceive as harm from others or fear of others. I would add a couple of things to that, and that is that, you know, I was thinking about, as you were speaking, I was thinking about a trip that I took in a kayak with a buddy of mine in LA. And we went to San Pedro, which is sort of a hop off point for Channel Islands. And we had a trip taken, we took a trip to Santa Cruz Island. Santa Cruz Island is off the coast. It's like Catalina, but it has no water. There's no people. There's some camping areas, and that's about it. Unfortunately, we picked a bad day. It was stormy, and we had a choice to cancel or not cancel. Okay, so we decided not to cancel because we were both macho and we didn't want to be the one to say, let's not do it. So we both did it, and we were both scared as hell. So we got to Santa Cruz Island. We put in on the south side of the island, on the leeward side of the island. So we were kind of protected and thought, hey, this isn't so bad. Well, we turned around a corner and all of a sudden all hell broke loose. You know, the swells were about 6 feet. I couldn't see my buddy in the kayak in front of me. And it was very, very terrorizing. Now, here's the point that relates to you. When those swells were coming up and hitting us and coming up and hitting us, and he would disappear, and I would be thinking, what am I going to do if I flip? Do I remember how to turn over if I flip in this damn thing? What I was thinking of was, first of all, my first reaction was, how can this be? This is not right. What's gone wrong? This is improper. Don't they know who I am? You know, stuff like that. But when I relaxed and I said, okay, this is a tough situation. This is something I got to really get out of. And I only have my paddle and me and my wits to do it. And once I let go of that, wanting the waves to stop and be the way I wanted them, wanting the circumstance to be in a way that I knew I could master. Once I gave up that and agreed that this was a hell of a thing and I had to get through it and I was going to use everything I could to do it, there was a calm that came over me. Now, I'm sure this happens to other people and with terrible results. A calm comes over them and they still get knocked off. Well, that's right. But my point is that you are unable to do anything that's of value unless you let all of your expectations of how you want it to be go. That's really what's causing your suffering. You know, here's another example. I'm talking too much, but I got one more.
Oh, no, you're great.
So here's another one. So you asked me before the show started, hey, what's your Saturday looking like? And I gave you a list of all the crap I got to do. And I was angry about it. Okay. So one of the ways I could have handled that would be to say, how much suffering am I adding to all the chores I have to do by making this hateful, by making this a drudge, instead of saying, hey, I get to write today. Hey, this is an interesting area I've never looked at. I'm going to research it and learn something new. I could have done that. But I didn't. I was being a victim. My Saturday's gone because I have to work on the computer. You know, so, you know, my point is it never ends, man. It never ends. But you got to have a technique of looking at it, laughing at it, and letting it go and just get on with the person that you want to be, which is someone who's compassionate, grateful, kind, and awake and present.
Yeah, you know, Rick, there was a lot there to unpack, man. I love the kayak story. It's just a great metaphor of things that are outside of our control, and that, you know, how it wasn't about changing the situation because you have no control over that. It was about changing how you related to the situation that really brought you, you know, calm. And, you know, with what we are experiencing right now in 2021 with COVID-19, what's interesting about that is that there are people who are talking about, I can't believe we're going back to this, and there's this resistance to it, which is completely understandable.
Hmm.
But it's just, how do I say it? It begs the question: is that the most effective use of your energy? To direct it with resisting it. Like if you could just see the possibilities in it,
Hmm.
it would be, it's pretty wonderful. But you have to calm yourself to see what the possibilities are. So I was talking to a friend of mine who is a colleague at work, and she's talking about a family member who is an adult, who is, a child who lives with her and her significant other. And we started to do this practice to where we do it in the morning, right? She set up her life very quickly to do her exercise in the morning, because this wellness intervention that we're doing suggests doing all the 5 activities that take less than 10 minutes in the morning. Well, a lot of, there are some people that are really struggling with that. Like, hey, I got to get up so much earlier. I'm not a morning person. It's 10 minutes, and you just go to bed, just go to bed 10 minutes earlier, it's the same 10 minutes. But I know, because I was that person too. I was arguing for all the reasons why it was not a good idea to do it that way. Instead of arguing for, like, what are the possibilities, the positive possibilities of doing it this way? But she embraced it fully. And so what she's found is that during the course of the week, because of how she'd work out in the evening, is she would have very little time to connect with her adult child, around dinner, because she'd be, working out when he might be eating. But by flipping the script and doing her workout in the morning as part of this practice, now they're having 2 to 3 connected, meaningful conversations in the evening, that weren't there before. That's one of the things that came out of her changing her perspective as she related to life and the situation. Instead of resisting it, she actually embraced it. A lot of people, when we had the first wave roll through in 2020 of the COVID pandemic, prior to that, they told me that I just don't have time to work out. I don't have enough time with my family. We're all going in different directions. I got this commute to work. Well, guess what? And I don't have time to work out. Guess what? Commutes were minimized, if not altogether scrapped. Working out, became much easier to do outdoors because you weren't in the office anymore. And in terms of your family, you were all together. No one was going anywhere. So if you had looked at it not as something that was limiting your activities, but it was giving you the ability to increase your connectedness with your loved ones and your activities, a lot of people could have been cooking together healthy meals. They could have lost weight that they wanted to, improve their fitness. They could have done all of those if they would have just flowed with the change instead of resisting it. And so what I've learned is when something happens that is not to my preference at the moment, that I can lean into it and accept it and have a completely different experience. Because my view of the grand scheme is so limited. I mean, each of us, as my friend told me, that we got our eyes pressed up, looking through a little keyhole, and we think we see the whole world, and we don't, of all the possibilities. But even in this moment, looking through that keyhole, there's an infinite amount of possibilities that can come from this whole experience that we're experiencing now. That for some is being categorized and defined as a setback. For me, it's an opening. I'm like, man, like, look at what I discovered last time we rolled through this. What am I going to discover this time? Like, let's do this. Like, so it's a completely different experience. I wasn't able to change, life or situations. I was just able to change internally. It's same situation, but I'm different. So that's all I want to say.
Yeah, and I think it goes way beyond the pandemic. I mean, people have all sorts of views about the effectiveness of the vaccine, whether they want it, and all of that stuff, and that's a little different issue. But what I want to say about your example is beyond the pandemic. It's really more about first realizing that you are the creator of a lot of what your anxiety is, not the external circumstance. In fact, I'd go further and say you're the creator of all of it. How you interpret it is how the life you're going to lead. Right. So if you want to be struggling and worried and anxious and not sleeping, it's easy to do. You just focus on all the things that you want to be different. And that'll show up for you. But you also have the control to switch that off. It doesn't feel like you do, because people say, well, how can you say that? I just got into a car accident. It's a brand new BMW, and now the damn thing's wrecked. And it's okay. Do all of that detail stuff. Okay. And then the conclusion that people come to is, how can you expect me to be any different because of this horrible thing? The answer is, it's how you look at it.
100%.
It's terrible. You can say to yourself, this is really awful, like kicking, when you knock your foot against the bedpost at night, you go, ow. But you don't say ow for 6 weeks, right? You have the ow and you get off it, and then you realize, okay, move on. It's kind of like that. And I think what helped me when I was starting down this path was to realize not only that I had the control to do it, what a gift that is if I could turn this off. And then the second thing is, once I realized that, I could create a sort of a mantra for myself. And the mantra goes something like this. Hey, Rick, do you realize who's controlling you right now? Your ego right now. You're suffering because you're going off on this tirade. Now, if you just stop that and come back to your higher self and come back to who you really are, things are fine. Things are fine. It's just the reaction that you have to it. Again, I have this discussion with people often, and the thing that gets thrown back is, what if we were taken over by China? Would you fight that, or would you just say, okay, let's go along with whatever the Chinese want because it's my higher self? That's kind of the counter argument to this kind of thinking. We're not advocating that. And the idea is that you fight like hell for what you believe in. That's a different thing, a political thing, or a thing that has to do with quality of life, or something that needs to be changed in the world. That's a whole different ball of wax than what we're talking about now, which is reacting to externals that bring you down, and you intentionally make it worse by going down this lane of, how could it happen to me, and it shouldn't happen to me, and the circumstances are wrong. Circumstances are there, and they're always going to be there, and you're always going to have the choice. So if you want to suffer, have at it. Lots of folks do.
Yeah, and Rick, to your point, I certainly did, man. My whole life prior to doing the practice was I spent it that way. I mean, this currency of this very temporary experience, I unconsciously chose to spend it suffering. Like, man, when you come to grips with that, and like at every step of the way, with every situation, I had a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And I was unaware that I had a choice. But now that I'm aware, I exercise it. And it's so easy to forget that you have a choice. And that's why that's what I love about the practice is it keeps you with a heightened awareness that there's always a choice.
That's right.
Like on my way to going to work, when I've been in a rush before the practice, I would have made every car in front of me an enemy that needed to be overtaken so that I could get to work.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as I drive into the hospital, and even if I'm running behind for some reason, I don't see it that way. I see that all these cars ahead of me that are coming in, that are being directed and being pulled forward and inspired by a higher purpose to care for people they don't even know. Like, are you kidding me? Everybody's coming in for this one single purpose, for people that look different than them, the people that may be in there for lifestyle choices that were not in their best interest. But they're still coming, they're still going to provide this care unconditionally, and the compassion is going to be coming from a never-ending source. Like, these are the cars in front of me. Why would I make them an enemy? The shared goal, man. So, but that's a choice. Yeah. I can still see cars in front of me as an enemy, or I can see people as like, wow, is there a greater, more noble cause than to serve others? I think not. So,
beautiful example. That should put a stopper on it, man. You can't do better than that. That's a very high level of looking at life and dealing with your choices. That's a very high level, Keith. Congratulations.
Awesome. Awesome. And thanks, Rick. You helped me get there. I love you, man.
Well, thanks, man. See you next time.
See you next time.